Welcome to Shareholders of a Better World, brought to you by TBLI Group. At TBLI Group, we have an established reputation as an organization dedicated to building the ecosystem of global sustainability and impact investing. We're doing this through educating, advising, and facilitating transactions in global sustainability and impact business, as well as capital solutions for private companies, family offices, and fund groups. For nearly 25 years, TBLI Group has created a vertically integrated ecosystem of education to action through TBLI conferences and TBLI consulting. More about our company can be found at tbligroup.com. This webinar is brought to you by TBLI Foundation, which hosts educational learning experiences dedicated to a better planet. Through the foundation, we build sustainable communities by sharing the people and the experiences making a difference to so many of our lives around the world. Our weekly podcasts bring impact thought leaders that are doing and not only chatting. Now let me introduce my guest today. Welcome from our Amsterdam studio, TBLI webinar, Shareholders of a Better Planet. We are thrilled today because a very dear friend of mine, Dr. Glenn Frommer, one of the world authorities on reporting, is going to share his wisdom with us. Before I do that full introduction, I just want to welcome all of the people that have signed in already. Samuel, Ricky, Mariella, Jack, thanks for joining us from Washington. Martin, Maria, Lydia, Kiara, Avanesh, Dita, AC, Michael, Michelle, Vega, Steen, Priyanka, Leah, Philip, Martin, John, Kate, Gordon, Agnes, Naoko, Ramesh, Michael, Kim, Rob, Masaki, Joseph, Manav, JB, and the rest. Thank you all very much for joining. If you have any questions, enter them at the bottom under open questions, and we'll address them as we go forward. Use the chat area just to introduce yourself or chat with other people. Our guest today, our only guest today, is Dr. Glenn Frommer, who, if you read his bio, it seems like something out of a Mel Brooks 2,000-year-old man, because the guy has done so many things. I think he climbed Mount Everest barefoot 6 times, is a PhD in acoustics, has ran the sustainability department of MTR, one of the few transport systems that actually makes money. And he's always speaks the radical truth. So Glenn, for those who don't know who you are, which is possible, please tell us briefly who you are, what you're doing, and what you think of reporting, because you've won so many awards for the best ESG reporting. Glenn, go ahead.
Thanks, Robert. It's a pleasure to be with you, Sam, today, and with all my friends and colleagues on the net, sharing our experiences about ESG reporting. First, a disclaimer. As some of you will know, I'm a failed astronaut. My biggest wish as a child, I wanted to be an astronaut, but I didn't. I couldn't. I didn't want to go to military school. So I wound up studying aerospace engineering, and I have a degree as a rocket scientist. So I've applied that to the ESG space. The, shall we say, the social, the environmental stuff came fairly early on. My uncle was involved in the Postal Workers Union in the 50s and 60s after the war. And we took some time out of that to look at something called civil rights in the 60s. We took some time out of that because of the Vietnam War. We took some time out of that because of the environment starting in the 70s. I was peripherally involved in the sloop Clearwater, Pete Seeger's sloop that would sail up and down the Hudson and hold amazing folk music concerts along the side. In the end of the 60s, I was working at and studied at NYU and NASA. I worked on the space shuttle, on high-speed aerodynamics of multiple warhead missiles. And I moved to study bioengineering, biomedicine at Stanford, where I worked on cochlear mechanics and cochlear implants. I moved to Denmark in '77 with a Fulbright to study surgery, inner ear surgery. And I started working at an F.L. Schmidt company on the acoustics of building products, looking at noise, vibration, building new products, buildings, drilling platforms, ships, the like. Then went to Australia to do something similar for an Australian company in Sydney. And in '92, I went to Hong Kong. '92 was the starting time of the airport core projects to 10 major civil engineering projects in Hong Kong. And my job for the MTR was ensure that the railway could open on the 1st of July 1997 and have no environmental consequences whatsoever. So simple job, simple one sheet job description, just make sure we could open. The 1st of July '97 was the handover or the takeover or the return to the mother bosom day, depending on how you wanted to put it. And we achieved that milestone. We got the railway open in time. And during that time, I worked very closely with procurement and with safety, project safety, construction safety. And that's really one of the keys of learning about who you're reporting about. You've got to know a company, an organization, down to its key values, its key people, its key principles. And those 8 years where I was working with procurement, the safety people, um, you learn a lot of people, you build a lot of trust. Because if you think that you're going to be hired to write sustainability reports all by yourself, there's teams, there's lots of people you have to interact with, and they need to trust you. You have to be a safe pair of hands. So if anybody wants to write a really good award-winning ESG report, start by getting the people's trust of who you're reporting for. I stayed in Hong Kong until 2013 when I retired from the MTR, and then I moved back to Denmark to be with my family. And I now live in Copenhagen. And I brought my library with me, which you can see behind a bit of which you can see. But getting back to the ESG reporting, aside from getting people's trust and having them let you talk about them on a sustainability spectrum, you really have to have a stimulating and an interesting story to tell. Most sustainability reports I read are boring. I don't really care about reading them. I tend to read a few of the environmental, social bits, safety bits. I'll read the CEO letter and then really don't like the rest of the report. They're typically not inviting, they're not well designed, they're certainly not edited very well. So you got to tell a story, you got to get the right people. You got to get talented people to be your editor, to be your designers, the photographers. It's got to be a nice story that fits with the company. There's got to be a story that the chairman, the CEO, and everybody else is willing to extend. And let me tell a little story. In the early days of reporting at the MTR, I was fumbling. How do I talk about environment, social, and governance, and people, planet, profit, these three things? And I came across the idea. I know. I'll talk about a frisbee, a soccer ball, and an American football, because my chairman was an American football fan. And I figured, well, if you talk about a company that's only interested in profit and maybe a little bit in governance, and maybe it's like a frisbee, it's kind of flat and round disc, and a company that's interested in people, planet, profit all equally, well, that's like a soccer ball. And a company that balances things out on one of the axes becomes a football. So, voila. This is an MTR football. It's one of these squeezy little things. We issued one for every staff member at the MTR so they could learn about sustainability. The chairman loved it. We have a picture of him holding a football like a Heisman Trophy winner. He loved it. He told the story. Our biggest fan that year. Really good. But telling the story isn't enough with a report. there's always the context of the report. It's how you put it out to the supply chain, the value chain, how you look at local businesses, how you're telling a story and helping them achieve what they want to achieve, and then moving that story internationally. I had the great fortune of working with the International Association of Public Transport in Brussels back in 2000, 2001, when they decided they wanted to have a sustainability commission. And we were able to work with Alstom, Thales, Bombardier, Siemens, and many, many others, and build environmental and social reporting as a key value product for each of those companies. So we could take the success story from Hong Kong, replicate that, and take it out into the international workplace. Now, of course, the MTR loved this because the whole focus of MTR was to take this state-owned Chinese company and make it soft and cuddly, go to Europe, and then win rail franchises in Europe, which is exactly what we could do because the MTR could compete on equal foot with all the big European companies that were listed in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, FTSE for Good, Corporate Knights, and the like, because MTR was there as well. And it's an amazing journey to sit and talk to these people that are looking to invest money in the business and tell them, well, what you see is what you get. It really is that way. The other part of this is how do you keep a story fresh? Because each time you tell the story, well, the story comes out, you've worked on it for 6, 7, 8, 9 months. What about next time? And I found that looking at a rolling program of 2 to 3 years of keeping the story fresh, letting people see, basically I'm writing this year's story, looking down the pipe 2, 3 years. Well, there's this direction, there's that direction, but being able to have that flexibility of how to move the report. One of the difficulties I've run into with sustainability, and many of you have experienced this, is the whole issue of software. Somehow you have to keep track of all your numbers. In the old days, back when Series had their the Valdez principles, which became the Series principles in '89, you could do things on a spreadsheet. That's not allowed anymore. You have to have cloud coverage, and you have to have big consultancy houses tell you how to make dashboards and the like. But the problem I found is that if sustainability people want their own piece of software, they give them the responsibility for it. And it really should be the responsibility of the people that maintain the financial data as well. Because we shouldn't be having staff use their time and the focus on software. That should be within the IT. So there's a huge discussion there, which I'm sure many of you have been through. But I would look to the trend of getting Oracle, SAP, and the others to start building or develop sustainability modules and move the kind of data maintenance away. So there's a little bit from my side, Robert, on how you make award-winning reports.
I just want to kind of come back. So you're a Jewish kosher vegetarian from the Bronx coming to Hong Kong to convince a Chinese state-owned enterprises that wasn't doing anything on sustainability at all, and completely different culture. I don't know if you still had the long beard then, or this is a recent phenomenon. And you had to convince them this is important for us to do. So apart from the football, you made it seem very easy. How did you get buy-in at the top that this is the direction, and how long did that take you?
I think it took about 10, 15 minutes because
That long?
Yeah, that long. The board wanted to move from Hong Kong internationally. So they wanted the MTR to compete on equal footing with all the other transport companies. And all of these other transport companies were listed in the Dow and the FTSE, and they had this award and that award for social reporting, environmental reporting, and they were doing all this good stuff with labor unions. And all these great pictures of the CEO and the chairman baking cookies with all the old people. They had all that. So go out and do that. Okay, I can do that. Just have to find the right people to do it with.
And you did. I had a question. We were in Singapore, Sam and I. And we were visiting a family office, and we had a little difficulty finding this place. It was way out of town, and they were very keen in learning about sustainable investment and sustainability, particularly ratings of companies. So we opened the door, and there's a big sign on the wall: coal trading, oil trading, gas trading. That's where the family made their money, in that business, and they wanted to go sustainability. And they said to us, we don't understand this whole sustainability ratings. We looked at, the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. We've been studying this. How is it possible that companies that are the most toxic or the most polluting or the most carbon intensive score so well on the Dow Jones Sustainability Index? Shell and BP at the top, Pepsi, diabetes in the United States, over in obesity, Unilever, toxic cosmetics, and processed food. How do you answer people when they ask you that? We don't understand that. How is it possible?
Well, these companies have the money, they have the wherewithal, and they can throw the money to make the stories. You can get a good story fabricated. You can get some great photographs. You can work closely with various NGOs, and there's some very good NGOs, and they do very good work. You collaborate with them. That's the law. That's the lie of the land, the law of the land. They're the ones that decide. But as they're looking, I would have focused more on the trading aspect. If you know about trading, let's start looking about carbon credits. Let's start looking at water credits, health credits, social bonds. There might have been something there for you.
You're also active in the GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative. I think you're on every advisory board around of importance. And I remember I was speaking there once, and I said something a bit provocative, unusual for me. And I said, listen, reality check, everybody. Nearly none of your members use the Global Reporting Initiative as a dashboard for measuring or running their company. They use it as a tool to inform stakeholders. And I still think that's the case. What is your take on that? That people are just using these reports for stakeholders, but not really as an important metric for managing their company?
Still, basically, that's right. They're still doing the same thing. There was a report that came out in March that related the SDGs to the GRI indicators. So for all of you that are using the SDGs and say that these 17 tiles are what we're focused on, now you have a set of GRI indicators you can relate that to. The ratings agencies do not understand and use the data the same way as the companies do as they report. I don't know how many times I've had this same conversation, but the words don't even mean the same thing to the two sides, whether it's the push side from the corps and organizations or the pull side from the investors. You have a situation where MSCI and Sustainalytics can look at the same company and give them a very different rating. If you go to the pension funds that do their own ratings, they're different from MSCI and Sustainalytics and all the others. It's a full ball field. You pay your money and you get what you get. Got to be careful.
So if we're trying to get more and more people to embrace sustainability as a strategy for measuring the performance of companies to invest or divest. How do you address this? I remember I was at a conference at FTSE, and everybody was shouting, ESG data is not good enough. ESG data is not good enough. ESG data, over and over and over again. And I stood up and I said, how come you guys never say that the financial data is not good enough? We just went through this massive financial disaster, Enron, Parmalat, Madoff, the China hustle, trillions lost in financial write-downs, and you never said a peep. But there hasn't really been many companies that have gotten to really, really serious trouble because of faulty reporting. So you're saying there are differences in how people are approaching, but has it led to really massive errors? I think the only one that I know of was that Enron always used to get very high marks on their sustainability reports, but they ended up committing fraud. So I don't know if that's the same thing.
Yeah, Petrobras is another. They also got awards for their GRI reporting. Turned out to be fictitious. I'm not a financial reporting expert. I don't know all the different ways you can write and read a P&L report, but I'm sure those of you in the audience that can and do read P&L reports, I'm sure there's more than one way to do it. And that's how it's done. I know when I was doing the work for the MTR, I was singly focused on improving the internal governance of the company. We started with environmental parameters when we did procurement. We looked at safety issues when we were building things and operating things. We were moving 5 million people a day around Hong Kong. And then moving from there over to how do you actually govern, looking towards seeking continual improvement? How do you set in the systems? And that led to some very simple exercises. Well, what are the risks that the business is approaching? How do you assess risks? How do you catalog risks? How do you categorize them? And we built up an entire enterprise risk management system within the legal function within the MTR, very similar to what COSO is for those of you that are aware of the COSO initiative. And that looks from the company towards the outside. But it's not every company that will consider the risks from the stakeholder side into the company. So the mirror image sort of those risks. And that's what we were trying to do with the MTR. And one gets into this, I mean, I've described it a little bit like a figure eight with two sides where you have stakeholder engagement on the one side and you have risk management on the other side, and they interact with each other, time displaced, where you go back and forth between to get confirmation from stakeholders, to look at the risks, make sure you're treating them properly. And this is the kind of stuff that's now being adopted on TCFD with the governance, the strategy, the risks, and the metrics. So that process makes sense. You have to introduce some accountability. One of the things I'm looking forward to, and some of you may have seen some of my comments on LinkedIn, I'm looking forward to Mr. Larry Fink telling me how much of his bonus is related to ESG achievement and how much the bonuses of his people that are managing all of his trillions of assets under management are getting paid to achieve better environmental performance, better social performance, and improved governance. So for those of us that are working within a corporate, within an organization, we need to focus on process, on governance.
So that
Outside,
question, is that the definition of patience, waiting for Larry Fink to give you that information?
Well, I'm getting on in years. Somebody will someday ask him the question, or perhaps somebody in the audience can ask him the question the next time they see him.
To me,
on the investor side, Robert, the investors have to understand the processes within an organization. Do I really trust that organization? I understand how they earn the money. I understand how they use the money. When you go back to the St. Thomas Aquinas understanding of life, of the seven deadly C's: pride, greed, wrath, envy, the others. Do I want to invest in that? If you do, it's weapons, it's alcohol, it's sex. They're great returns on that. And I'm sure you can get an ESG ratings agency to give you a positive number on some of those companies. But is that what you want to support? Don't know.
No, I remember speaking to a group of faith investors, and they were very reluctant to embrace ESG at the time. This was many years ago. So I said, you can, if you really want to make returns, invest in drugs and weapons smuggling and child trafficking, because that's very profitable. So I said, no, we can't do that. So I said, then you do have values. You do have a limit of how you want to make money. Getting back to the issue at MTR, you said to me that nearly no public transport system makes money. The only reason why MTR is the only one of the few that makes money, is they own the real estate, which is where they make their money on. You also said to me, which was a bit surprising, everybody's pushing high-speed rail, and that there were only, I think, 2 lines in the world or 3 lines in the entire world that actually made money. Most of them all lose money and have to be subsidized. Is that still true?
Yeah, I think it's still true. The MTR has a high fare box return. It's in the low 60s, 60%. And that's very high for most public transport systems. The MTR fully funds its construction and its operations. In Singapore, the initial railway was given, I think it was sold for $1 I may be wrong, but that was the story I heard. And they are somewhat profitable. But there's no public transport system that earns money. It's very expensive to build it and to operate it.
Would it be possible to create a not a cap and trade system, a cap and share system? I mean, MTR developed a software that is used by the UK and Oyster, and these swipe systems that calculates, how much money on there. Could you create a cap and share system where every individual is given a carbon allowance? So doesn't matter how old you are, or how much money you get, a carbon allowance. Use a subway, you can make more, you can earn credits. Use SUVs, you have to buy more credits. And could you, because your system is quite sophisticated, could you use that in creating a kind of extra income for the public transport systems by generating credits by reducing CO2 emissions?
Straight answer, yes, you can do it. You just have to price the carbon accordingly. Carbon's running, about 15 euros a ton these days, or maybe a little bit higher today. Don't know, but it's fairly low. But yes, the software, the Oyster cards, the Octopus cards, they're enabled. They can easily do that.
Okay.
In fact, we were toying with the idea a decade ago.
Oh, okay. We're going to start taking some of the questions that are piling up over here. So Michelle had a question for you. Michelle Breer, we're working with startup companies of just a few people that develop drugs and medical devices, which take many years to develop before they obtain marketing authorization. Do you have any advice on what such companies can do in terms of ESG?
I hate answering a question with a question, but I mean, if it's for making a report, or what do you want to do with the ESG? You can talk about how you earn the money you earn and what the money is used on. You can talk about safety, education of staff, from a voluntary turnover rate. You can measure the promotion rate of internal people. You can look at the numbers of men, women, the diversity of your team. You can look at the networks that the team is involved in and the networks of the networks. You can look at how you're working and collaborating with other similar startups in other jurisdictions. I mean, I need a little. If she sends me the qualifications on my LinkedIn, I'll get back to her.
Okay. Does it frustrate you, or because I was always very impressed with you that you're quite non-judgmental. I can introduce you to Pol Pot or any mass murderer, and you'll sit down and have a chat with them without being judgmental in general. But when you're speaking to an audience of industrialists, which I'm sure you've often done, and you see that they just don't care at all about their externalities, their environmental, social performance. How do you stay non-judgmental and take the, hey, dude, wake up?
Yeah, I hear the question, Robert. Before I would stand up and talk to that audience, I would want to figure out how I get in touch with them on a level where they'll understand. And they'll be able to be some interchange. They'll be able to go, that's what he's getting at. For example, everybody today is talking about COVID-19 pandemic. I've been in lockdown since early March. I'm still in lockdown together with my wife. It's wonderful. When I talk to people about COVID-19, the industrialists are worried about the money they want to reopen their businesses and the like. Some of you may have seen a post I had in LinkedIn that ESG reports for the first time will have the Rosetta Stone, because everybody will be wanting to tell the story. How do they protect the staff? What do they do in their supply chain? What do they do in their value chain to build confidence and to get back how to recover and how to respond? And in 3-4 years from now, we should be out of the pandemic by then, the people that will be interviewing for new appointments, new employees, are going to say, hey, what did you people do during the pandemic? Why should I work for you if you haven't done anything for your staff? So it's necessary for me, who's giving a talk to industrialists, to go out and find that connection before I start talking. Because if not, then why bother talk?
Michelle, I'll come back to your question. I want to start taking a couple of new questions. Coddle from Runweg had a question for you. Glenn mentioned software for companies to collect and report data for ESG and sustainability reports. What software is he aware of that companies use for ESG sustainability KPIs and data? And from his experience, how is such data independently verified?
I'm not going to go into a list of all the software that I've bumped elbows with, used, abused, and no longer use, because I won't be able to name each one and give each one a rose or a cut or anything else. But I think the heart of the question that's been asked, excuse me, is about how do you make sure that the data is accurate? You need to have the data audited, and you need to do it over several years. You need to have the processes approved, whether it's by one of the big four or somebody else within the organization that can give you a certification that this indeed is audited data. We understand the risks in collecting, in calculating, portraying the information. We give the proper context because we have followed this accountability 1000 standard or whatever standards we use. But you've got to follow the given standards for the data. Now, as far as the software goes, each one of those data packages will talk to their advantages and disadvantages. And you'll have to sift through that. But think back to how will I use the data? What kind of dashboard am I going to present to my CEO and my chairman of my board? Will they understand the data? That should be the true KPI of whether that software makes any sense.
I just want to recount a true story. TBLI was contacted by a fund manager who had raised 600 million euro, and they called me and said, "We're going to be the best SDG fund manager in private equity." So I said, "Good." And I was about to hang up. No, no, you don't understand. We don't have anything. I said, "What do you mean you don't have any?" "Yeah, we raise the money, but we don't know how to do this, how to report, what to report, and we have to start reporting to the LPs." So, he said, "Okay, let me see if I can help you." And I knew the guy was a schnorrer. So I said, "You know what? I'm going to introduce you to a good friend who'll be able to help you." So I connected him with Glenn and kind of forgot about it. And about a year and a half later, I'm looking on the internet and I say, "Wow, look at this. The company won the annual private equity award for the best UN SDG reporting." So I thought, wow, we must be a genius or these awards are meaningless. Just to give you an idea that Glenn is also a member of the TBLI Expert Network, and that is very effective. He's more of a resultant than a consultant. So let's take the next question over here from Ama Siri. Looking at the events happening in the US and the protests around the world relating to this, why is ESG and impact investing afraid to talk about race? I mean, it wasn't, until now, it was not an issue. They also never talked about taxes either. So all the companies that avoided paying taxes were also never looked at as an issue. What do you think about talking about race in your ESG or impact investing? Although diversity seems to be an issue particularly within GRI.
I'd have to think a bit harder about getting back with an answer on that, because whether the issue is in race, whether it's in gender, whether it's in disability, whether it's in other forms, it's an issue of equality and inequality. And for years, the argument at MTR was you had steps leading up to the station entrance because the steps had to keep the water out of the station. Fair point. Well, how about putting in a ramp so people with a wheelchair could gain access? How do you get people in wheelchairs down an escalator? Now, that's the next issue. Maybe you should have a lift. Ooh, yeah. And each of those questions takes years to respond to, but they get responded to if you have the proper systems within the company, within the organization set up. And I would prefer not to be drawn. Watts, Newark, Detroit. Yeah. The assassination of Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Kent State, Jackson State. That's my history. Unpleasant.
Gustavo had a question. Who do you think that are the most important report users for company investors, clients, society, employees, or could be equal?
It's probably academics. They're the ones that actually read the reports. I would love the people that are attending the meeting today to tell me how many reports they have read cover to cover in the last year. It won't be many, I'm sure. They're incredibly boring. Investors, if they say they've read the report, they probably skimmed it. They've taken a few little quotes that they can say, yes, it supports my alpha calculations to do this, this, and this. The most important has got to be internally. How do you use the report? I used to prepare internal PowerPoints for each of the divisions and each of the levels within the divisions to tell the story. This is a good report. It's a football. Play that. internal use.
I was at, I think it was Lenovo, yeah, and they were very passionate about getting their sustainability reports done and accurate, and they were all complaining. Everybody showed up to the meeting. I was a bit surprised, all the senior people, and all complaining that no investor or hardly any investor ever asked for it. And I said to them, okay, take a number. That's been the complaint of most companies trying to do a good job on reporting, that few investors actually read it. That's your experience also at MTR?
Yeah, it is. I've toyed with the idea of just presenting the data, the gray pages, and then no story. But the whole point is storytelling. That's what gets people interested in buying shares in the company. What I am seeing are some investor groups, and I won't name them, that are starting to look at robots that pull the data off the net. So, and this is, some companies are using XBRL, Extended Business Reporting Language, to report their data. Some follow the GRI, some follow some other standards. But using that means that you can use the data. It's fairly secure. Some are using blockchain. I've got some initiatives along that direction that seem pretty reasonable. But what I'm seeing is that people are developing robots that skim through the net and just pull out information. They pull out the number of times a company is mentioned in publications, and they use that as a proxy for how good a company is. And it seems to be a fairly good proxy. So if companies don't smarten up and make the data crisp and make it easy to get at, use XBRL or blockchain, however, they're just going to find out that people are just going to take the data anyway and use it the way they want. And investors don't use the data the same ways that the companies and organizations use it.
Philip had a question. In your view, is there a way to standardize and globalize the measurement of CO2 emission reductions from a portfolio of clean tech owned by one or several private or public investors to generate carbon credits that can be monetized and shared?
Yes.
Answer. I think if you want, Philip, you want details, just reach out to Glenn.
Yeah, it's a longer answer than that, but the answer is yes, it can be done.
Okay. Lyndon wanted to know, do you want to, don't want to put you on the spot. I don't think you can with Glenn, but what are the ESG reports out there that we should be aspiring to? What are the gold standards now that you're no longer making them for MTR? I lost him also. Lost him. Okay. Glenn? I can't. Glenn? Did we lose you? Glenn, can you reconnect to us? So while Glenn is reconnecting, okay. Question for me, John. Did the family in Singapore move to embrace ESG? Yes, they were. They were actually quite serious about this, and they had actually taken probably 6 months to 9 months. They were studying the whole process, the methodology, and are quite aggressively moving in that direction. I was very, pleasantly surprised, and they were also quite critical of the methodology that was being used. Stuck. Ask him to reconnect. Okay, hang on 1 second. Reload page. My apologies for this. Glenn lost contact with us, so he will rejoin us. No, but we had a very long conversation with him. I was actually rather surprised to find a family office that was quite serious about this. And they've also been joining several of our webinars and investor salons to learn as much as possible about this. So that's why I always used to say jokingly that, I work with irresponsible investors and criminals, mainly people who are not looking at ESG or impact. But if you show them the opportunity and you show them what it means and how can it assist them to achieve the goals that they have and also reduce their risk, it's really not that hard to get buy-in. My experience has been not so much the difficulty of getting buy-in. The difficulty was access. Can you actually get access to the decision makers, to the ones who actually decide? That's a challenge. Convincing, the Donald Trump types who have a low level of understanding are actually relatively easy to convince. That was always surprising to me, having done this 25 years, is that the story and the message has not really changed. From 25 years ago, the methodology might be better, information might be better, data might be better, interest might be higher, but in general, it's not that difficult at all to get people interested in it. And if you ask anybody, do you want a financial return with a social environmental added value? I've never met anyone who says, no, I want all my money to make life miserable for everyone, and I'm working at that 24/7. So the issue of convincing whether a person is in the coal trading or the Koch brothers, that's not really the issue. It's the issue of you have to speak the language of the person you're talking to. Don't shout loudly in Mandarin to someone who speaks German. And the mistake that was often made is that people would shout loudly in a different language. They weren't speaking the language of the financial sector. Welcome back, Glenn.
Yeah, hi. I would agree with you, Robert. One could almost make a compendium of the risks that one wants to address with impact investing as it appears to the investor. You want to enhance your share price, your money. You want to enhance your reputation. You want to protect yourself from government interference. You can make a list. And as you said, Robert, it's fairly simple and straightforward to make the arguments in support of that move.
Before we lost you, there was a question put out of what are the ESG reports out there we should be aspiring to? I think that a competitor of advising on ESG reports must have tried to interfere with our transmission. So if you can go back to this question, what are the ESG reports out there we should be aspiring to?
There's too much of an echo on the line. I can't follow.
Can you hear me now?
Can we clean that up
again? Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me now?
You still have an echo.
All right, I'll go
Let's
to
try
the
it
next
again.
question.
Try the question again.
Okay. What are the ESG reports that you find gold class standard?
Right. I'm not going to respond to that.
Okay.
I get involved in advising too many people on their reports. And if I give a name of what I think is a good report, there's a bit of conflict of interest.
No
So
problem.
let's not go there.
Martin, some statistics show that millennials, who are set to inherit one of the largest handovers of wealth in history, are especially considerate of ESG factors in their investment making decisions when choosing stocks or ETFs. How can corporates be made more aware of this incoming development?
That was all in an echo, Robert. I'm sorry.
Can you look at the question at the bottom, Martin, and read that?
The name again was Martin.
It's the last question at the list.
The last question I have is from Brenda.
Oh, okay. I have here, how can corporates be made more aware of the incoming development of wealth transfer to millennials?
No, I think the protests are waking people up.
Okay.
The window opened twice, that's why it's echoed.
Oh, your window opened twice, that's why. Okay. We'll try to address this. Glenn, you have two windows open on your browser, which is why you're getting this echo. So if you close one window, you should be okay.
Okay. Is that any better?
Yes.
Good. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. Going back to this question, ESG and impact investing seem to be used interchangeably by many, while I think this is not the same. The first is geared toward risk management. The second is goal-oriented. Agree. And how does sustainability fit in there?
The missing brick is the strategy in the company or the organization. If you think back to competitive advantage, the way that Porter describes it, with strategy, cost leadership, and differentiation as being the three main factors, and think cost leadership, that's risk, differentiation, stakeholder engagement, strategy, the vision, mission, value of the company is the brick that binds the two and pushes the sustainability agenda forward. How it's done on a particular basis is very difficult to describe without having details.
And Avanish had a question. Who should be learning about ESG reporting in school? MBAs, accountants, engineers?
All of the above.
If you gave a kind of ranking at the moment in where has the sophistication in ESG reporting and consciousness of the corporate world. I mean, everybody still believes that all of the companies in the world are listed on the stock market. It's only a very small number. Most of them are not on the stock market. Where do you think we are at the moment in the quality and the consciousness of ESG reporting with respect to the financial sector and the non-financial sector?
Very low on both, unfortunately. I've heard Ralph Thurm from Reporting 3 say that it was under a few percent, perhaps 6-7% of all the companies in the world, listed companies in the world, that had any sort of ESG reporting attached to it at all. So it certainly isn't mainstream. So it's a very, very small factor. And even though in the States you've got SASB where they say, well, the 10K, 20F filings have to include a complete risk assessment of the environmental and social and the governance risks beyond any financial risks that you may have. If you read those filings, they are incredibly poor. They say very, very little. So that, I mean, we are just at the tip of getting this stuff out there.
Basically, everybody has ugly children.
Yeah, pretty much, except yours and mine.
What can this audience or anyone who's listening to this one or the taped webinar, because we are taping this and we will put it on our YouTube channel, what can they do to improve what you just said, that it's the quality is poor, the interest is low? How do we move to the next level of awareness, commitment, and money flows?
Well, for the people that do the ESG work, that write the reports, that review the reports, that audit the reports, we should be constructing networks between ourselves. We should be trying to build capacity between ourselves. We could be looking at some sort of sustainability certification of having some sort of shop for people that can actually do the work, instead of just putting a sign outside saying, come here, I'll do the work for you. Then we need to take the moves. We need to put those issues in place, those initiatives in place. Talking to people, reading, going to meetings and learning about whether it's future fit, GRI, planetary boundaries, the social donut, whatever it is. We should be learning, sharing, trying to build each other's capabilities and capacities.
Naoko had a question for you. What do you think of B Corp movement and their B impact assessment?
Positive. I work with an Israeli plastics company that is a B Corp, and I like the survey that they produce, but you've got to work with the governance within the company to make sure that it really is true, that you're getting continual performance, that you're getting the performance that you're putting into the surveys. Just having the chops not enough.
Okay. How far are we from GAAP or IFRS requiring ESG reporting? Is there any chance at all?
Well, if you had one of them on the line today, they would say, well, we're talking about it. You know, we'll move that way. I don't know. If they see a business reason for doing so, increasing their competitive advantage of the accountants, they'll do so.
Do you still believe that the ones doing the most are talking the least, and the ones doing the least are talking the most?
Yeah, I think that's a good characterization.
Okay. Any final comments? We're coming to the end of our time together.
Well, I would encourage that everybody who's tuned in today tries to link up with everybody else that's tuned in today, if that's somehow possible.
Mm-hmm.
Just try to share our LinkedIn addresses or our emails so we can try to build some bridges and build some initiatives and share the information that we have.
Well, with our next generation of events, we'll be doing that. We're also creating this kind of virtual cocktail party and coffee break where people will be able to have on their smartphone the ability to connect with everyone. Every 5 minutes, you'll get introduced to a new person, and we'll be launching that soon. We're doing a virtual cocktail party Friday for those of you who want to join. If you like what we're doing with these webinars, please support TBLI Foundation. Just go to tbli.org, support us so that we can expand and do more. We're planning on doing quite a lot this year, and we will also be launching a membership system to provide extra services for those who want to expand. Glenn, this has been a treat. I really appreciate you taking the time. I send you my best to you and Matilda, and to the rest of your family. And if there's anything that we can ever do for you, please let us know. You stay well.
Will do. Thanks. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
I have to close and thank a lot of people on the production staff. So the list is actually quite long, so it'll take a while. So first I want to thank Sam, our webinar producer and ambient DJ, Ricky, our cooking machine and absolute better half, Donnie Trump, our sun tanning and makeup advisor, Xi Jinping, head of transparency and integrity, Jair Bolsonaro, director of forest conservation, Kellyanne Conway, in charge of Alternative Facts Department, Boris Johnson, our hairstylist, Vladimir Putin, conflict resolution supervisor, Joe Biden, mental health coach, and Rodrigo Duterte, our recreational drugs mentor. Thank you and see you next week.